Good morning to all of you.
Jumping
And as Nathan first, that we got to recognize first.
That's right.
Uh,
Who's on first?
Who's on first? What's on second?
Yep.
Anyways, as I had bbeen pontificating about, my name is Neil with Simpson Family Jeeps, joined in Grandma's Couch Studio.
Oh, he's distracted, so I'll go first. The mad scientist sorter of parts this morning.
He is so mellow this morning.
He is.
He's extra mellow.
He's chill. He's just relaxed.
Chill. Yeah, the edge is off at the moment.
It's
He
fine.
has not been painting.
No,
That's the problem. And then I'm Jeff Shermani.
you sure?
The Italian Stallion, organizer of inventory.
Yeah.
And liquidator of product,
Yes.
ideally.
Yeah.
We've got product that needs to go, folks. We got like they're not full
stupid
gear
old
sets.
inventory.
Yeah, we have old inventory. I'm so tired of looking at. It just needs to go.
Nathan says if you ain't first, you're last.
Hey. Get it, Ricky Bobby. Anywho, today we are doing this special Q&A session, and so hang in there for that. Most of the questions have been submitted ahead of time. Don't know that we will get to any live audience questions, but feel free to ask it in the comment section. Maybe somebody else will jump in and answer for you. And if it's incredibly compelling, maybe we'll jump in and read it at a point. So
I'm excited. We had several good questions get put in. So
we did. And I thought of one this weekend
Oh,
that I might curveball.
you're not supposed to be asking the questions.
just-
This is
I'm
for our
just saying.
listeners.
I'm just saying I might curveball one.
Oh boy.
All right. Anyways,
Well,
how was your weekend? How was your guys' weekend?
Go
Your
ahead,
family
Scott.
came back.
He's ready to jump on it. I saw that. He was
He
itching.
was.
packed
right?
about like 8 years of life in the 1.5 days.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, right?
That's how I feel.
100%.
We were on a roll. We got a lot done. Cleaned up the yard, mowed the grass, worked on the car. I mean,
I'm gonna jump back first and say you've got your new vintage shirt on.
I do.
And just a fun piece. You guys are going to want to look for the new Life in Low Range video coming out. Scott's rocking the shirt for our listeners at home. And Scott and I had an opportunity to do a 10-year reunion, if you will.
Yes.
Last time we were at this particular show was the 21st show.
Yep.
For the Spring Willie's reunion, hosted right here in Ohio, right in the great city of Akron-ish,
Canton.
Akron-Canton area.
Yep. And it drug in people from Canada and all over the East Coast, I would say.
Absolutely, up and down the East Coast, and so they used to have geographical. There used to be a West reunion. There was a
Right.
South reunion, and I don't know whatever happened to those, but I know that. And a shout out to the event organizers, husband and wife team, Bob and Mindy Christie, to my knowledge, and you know what, we prioritized heading down there. We had a great time.
There was a lot the same. There was some differences,
Yes.
some good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, such is life. There's the familiarity is nice. That's the reason we like the car shows and the car scene, you know. But then there's some new and unusual vehicles. There was great literature donated by, well, at least donated on display by our friend Keith Yauman.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Angry Turtle owner Jason joined us.
Yep.
So Savage, you drove the Celeste, your JT down, and you know we had all the beef stuffed into the cab of the truck.
Yep.
And had a wonderful day. But you have the vintage shirt on, which was super cool, and you'll see that on the upcoming Life in Low Range vid.
Yep.
Anywho, back to your weekend. My bad. I looked over. You were so charming. You were dashing.
So a little update on the car real quick. Making up a switch panel that will turn on the fog light. Let me make the electric fan come on like override, and I'll be able to function the fuel pump, which is purely for backup purposes.
Now, on the car,
Yep.
if I recall correctly, if you're one of our Patreons, you got a special little treat in
Yes.
Discord.
Yes. Got to hear its first puffs of life.
Nice.
And first time ever that motor ran in the car, and the first time in 4.5-ish years, maybe we'll say 3 years will be nice, but that it's made any noise.
That the car as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It is, and congratulations on that. And
Yep. And we'll,
You too can join us on Patreon. Just think about it, folks. Check us out over there and get access to a kind of an insider Discord with us that we, talk about our own projects and our own lives.
I was a little sad though. I made that really artsy post on there. No one said anything.
Artsy post.
I tried anyway.
Oh man, I missed it.
Yeah.
I
Fail.
I'm gonna circle back.
Yeah,
I'm gonna circle
Go
back
back
to
and
it.
relook at that.
Yeah, that's for sure. So the switch panel. This is a legit question, and this is something that my wheels are spinning on, especially for our customers and our builds and whatnot. What switches do you use that correlate well for the application? And that might be upchurch talking, but like, are you not going to use like modern day Carlin plastic switches, are you?
Correct. That actually took quite a bit of thinking. I thought about using old school metal, just flip switches, but I found a dash knob that I like that I mentioned on a previous update that looks like a factory knob, but it's metal. So I thought, well, if I get a pull switch, then I can use those knobs on there.
Sure.
Obviously have to adapt threads and that kind of stuff. So I actually sent the wife after work to the tractor store,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a heavy duty and a medium duty pull switch with 2-terminal. So basically it could be used like a headlight switch for all intents and purposes. That's what it looks like. But instead of having 2 positions for parking and headlight, it just has 1.
Excellent.
So that's what we're doing.
And I think that's kind of one of the fun things, and people might not even, be aware enough to think about the diversity of what we as a business bring to the table. But that's one of the things that I'm at the show on Friday, at the Willys event. And so on one hand, we're tasked with building these really cool vintage, esque resto mods. Or full restorations, and then also these wild performance vehicles. And
Yep.
the type of parts, while they have to function similarly, oftentimes have to aesthetically look very different.
Well,
You
I have a theme with the car, and you have to try to make everything match that so that someone won't notice later.
Exactly. And as I'm perusing these vintage Jeeps last week, I'm thinking to myself, I don't want a new Carlin style,
Mhm.
rocker switch. I want, an appropriate pull switch or something. And then, do you just go with the aviation, the hard metal
Right.
switches?
Which would
you
be
know?
okay.
Which would be okay, but like
That was like my backup plan.
correct, right?
Yeah.
I don't want that to be my first choice. I want that to be
And
the backup plan.
the fog light switch is really cool. It's an actual vintage fog light switch that you turn the knob to turn it on and off.
cool.
Mhm. I saw a couple F-Script parts for
Mhm.
sale at the show.
Always.
Always. If you're listening at home and you're unfamiliar with the F-Script, is for a period of time Ford produced for all intents and purposes the Jeep.
Yes.
They
Now, if you've
had
been
their own
following
line,
along and you know the drinking game, that was your cue.
no doubt. and and so Ford has this run of their Jeep, and of course when they made it, they didn't want Willys to have any of the credit,
No.
right?
Well, they were worried about a warranty.
Warranty. That's
Yes.
specifically it. They were worried about warranty, and they didn't want you getting that filthy, dirty Willys parts
Yes.
in their highfalutin Ford parts. So they F-script everything. They put a little an F from that era,
Yep.
stamped or cast into every nut, bolt, gear, whatever you name it,
Everything.
had it, and that brings a pretty price point because you Ford folks, weirdos,
Yes.
weirdos. Goes for you at home too, listeners. I'm here for it. Weirdos, Ford people.
Yep.
Fix or repair daily.
It was fun at the show. Someone mentioned about Jeeps and the old Jeeps and that sort of stuff. I was like, oh, I'm trying to resist, not to get back into that. I have one in queue, sort of, but no. And he's like, well, what are you working on? And I said, oh, a Ford. And he's like, oh. And I said, well, it's a 36. Well, and then it suddenly was okay.
Then it was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Now, we went not with a lot of money in our pocket, but we also didn't really see anything we had to bring home.
I think we need like an honor, because not only did we find a cheap Jeep, but it was on a trailer, and the guy was from this area, and none of us bought it.
We still haven't. There's still time.
Well, there is, but
Oh boy.
Still time. There was a CJ2 pushed. It was a pile of parts pushed into the shape of a CJ2,
It looked like one. That's all that matters.
and but the wheels.
Yes.
I would have paid this price. I would have paid his
Yes.
asking price just for his wheels.
Yes.
I would have.
Yep. They were so cool.
They were so cool, and they just don't have like as a vintage resto product. Those wheels are not available anymore
No.
in that configuration. It was so cool. I should have bought them for the 6. I might still. Maybe.
You're in the mood to buy parts Jeeps.
You're gonna have to, folks. You're gonna have to tune in. I may or may not have bought one over the weekend as part of my update.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, do you got anything going on? Or Scott, were you done?
I'm done.
All right.
I had a wonderful weekend with the weather being so nice. Kristen and the kids came back from Texas on Friday. So we took the kids to the drive-in theater Saturday night in Waterford, Pennsylvania. Got to watch 2 movies, the If, which is that Ryan Reynolds movie about
Mhm.
imaginary friends, and Arthur the King, which is that true story of the dog that went with the race team on that cross-country race.
Okay.
So it was I honestly really liked the second movie better than the first even.
Interesting.
I was surprised. Really good movie.
I do not go to the drive-in theater enough. You both have gone a fair amount.
Yep.
I really enjoy it, and we set up the
Are they still? Is it still dirt cheap, like for the concessions and stuff?
ish. It's cheaper than going to the theater, but not by much. But you
Oh,
get 2
okay.
movies for the price of one.
I know you get 2 movies price of one, which is a great deal. But I mean, there was a moment, and we're talking a decade and a half ago.
Oh yeah, it was stupid cheap.
It was like popcorn was like 50 cents. It was
Yeah.
like ballpark.
no, and
like
inflation
Little
has
League.
touched everything at this point.
Okay.
and it's still not bad. But what's nice is it's
How much attendance? What was the attendance like?
Oh, it was pretty full. I mean,
Really?
yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
I'm never like, hey, you know what we should do tonight? We should go to the drive-in movie theater. Like, that's cool. I appreciate.
You gotta have
But
a
that's-
gladiator so you can chill on the bed.
That's
though.
exactly what I was going to tell you.
gosh. Okay.
We literally set up like a padded area to lay on, and we just lay down, watch the movie in the bed of the truck. It's awesome. And we actually had the Conestoga wagon set up, so we had like our own little privacy area. So we were just enclosed watching this movie.
That's so cool.
It was awesome.
That is cool.
Bluetooth speaker, so we had the nice radio, but on a good quality speaker. So it was really
Nice.
enjoyable.
Nice. Excellent.
So we did that, and then of course, like Scott said, summer maintenance on the yard. I've been working. You made a joke about inventory management or sorter for me.
Yeah.
That's literally right now. I'm just in that mood. My house, my garage. I'm going through overhauling everything in my garage, trying to get it
Mhm.
cleaned up and organized. And as part of that, I'm looking at the shop and looking at my house, going, I'm disorganized everywhere at this point, and I can't handle it.
What is that about
So-
life that in like the concept of like spring cleaning gets people excited to
So I've never done spring cleaning in the past. Like that's just not a thing for me.
Okay.
It's usually I do more of the cleaning in the fall usually.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever this year, it just kept piling up, and I think with everything that went on with our family last year, and with Xander's eye, which by the way, his prosthetic, we're going for hopefully the final appointment this week.
Nice.
But his eye looks awesome now.
How
That's
cool.
awesome.
Excellent.
But so there's with everything that went on, I think I fell behind more than usual, and then looking at the chaotic state of that, and then we have all this old inventory here that wasn't well organized because we just kind of tossed it on shelves. I think it got to me, and I'm like, nope, I can't handle it anymore. I got to go through and organize everything.
I'm with you, but I feel like as humans, and I want our listeners at home and maybe our live folks to weigh in and go, does other people, are you equally affected by like there's this big push in the spring to like clean and organize, and then again in the fall? I would agree that the fall there's a push and to kind of organize yourself. Is it because we get so busy in the summer months, the winter months, they just drag on, and we're hibernating? Like, what is it? Why does it get to that point? Why do we not maintain more of a status quo? Why is it the peaks and valleys,
Mm-hmm.
And are other people affected by that? I certainly know on a personal level, we have all exchanged stories about this roller coaster of like accumulation, and then I'm just going to get rid of stuff, and
Yep.
I'm going to clean up the yard, and now I'm actually going to, weed whip and mow and rake and burn trash and all that. Not burn trash, but trash wood.
And then you tease Scott about maintaining his tractors.
Mm-hmm. It's fine. With the earbuds and you can't hear it knocking. It's fine.
Oh God. Oh
It
God.
quits after a while.
Oh
Give it
dear.
pep talks. It's fine.
Oh, I wasn't ready, Scott.
No. Not for the maintenance conversation. I
Joe,
really
Joe
enjoy-
O'Brien's in there saying my garage is a mess too. So
Well,
yeah,
and that's the
I
funny
feel
thing,
you,
as
Joe.
humans,
It is.
the vast majority of us. I was just creeping on because a lot of people. And again, politely, I'm going to tell you, if you follow me on Facebook, and a number of you do, I'm going to be in your business. I'm making it just a public declaration. People don't seem to mind, but I'm going to be like creeping in your garage when you post a picture. I'm going to be looking at what's hanging on your wall. I'm looking at the stickers on your fridge. It's valuable for you to know that that's the case. So all these people who are working out of their house in their garage this weekend, doing the organizing, I'm like in their garage looking, through the lens.
He's such a
know?
creep.
Right?
Through their lens. And I'm just like, how many people don't park in their garage?
Yes.
The majority of you. The majority of you don't park in your
I
garage.
mean, I have a car in a 3-ish car garage. It's fine.
Yeah.
I have a 2-car garage and no room for either. But my Jeep won't even fit in there at this point. But that's besides the
Well,
point.
that's what I'm saying.
Even if it was empty, I can't park the Jeep in there. So
That is exactly what I'm saying. And there was tons of people who were posting pictures of their weekend adventures, and I thought to myself, like, nobody's parking in the garage. And I factually, after selling our property in Pennsylvania, obviously it was just an overpriced storage unit. I hadn't used that garage for parking purposes in like a couple years. I have obsessively in my relationship ensured that my wife could park in the garage. Since we were first married, it was always important. I tell the story about the business, how I'd have to shove project vehicles outside so she could park in her bay, so on and so forth. But I almost never park in a garage. I just fill it with junk.
And speaking of that too, I also should point out that the weather was so nice and is supposed to be so nice this week that we took the Jeep with doors off and top off to the theater.
That's awesome.
So
I also
it was a little bit of cold driving at 1 a.m. coming back from Pennsylvania, but Scott couldn't handle it.
no.
I was all right. By the time we got to the house, I was ready to warm up, but otherwise it really wasn't that bad.
I am telling you, I am living my best life with this cheap Jeep. I am living I did this once before in Baby Jeep, if you recall.
Mhm.
Baby Jeep was a hardtop YJ 95. It was a bucket list Jeep for me. And I took the top off the first time mid-March, and I drove it all summer and just tarping it off and canopy and all that kind of stuff. I am thrilled to be driving this cheap Jeep again. It's even better than I remember it.
I honestly think the wind therapy is why I'm like so productive at the moment with reorganizing everything, because
There's truth
it's
to
just it re-energizes
There
you.
is truth to that. For those of you who need that experience, and I am so close to taking the windshield down on the Jeep that I'm in right now as well. I want as little.
Is it going to come back, though?
Is the windshield going to come
No.
back?
Yeah.
No, it's done. Once he takes it down, it's done.
I need a footman loop. Somebody robbed the footman loop off of it.
No.
Because the
I don't-
Jeep started out, just so everybody at home knows, this was a parts Jeep that I bought.
Yep.
And slowly but surely, Scott's going out there robbing pieces of it off for
may-
projects.
The tailgate
may
doesn't
not-
have a latch.
And I'm shoving it back into the shape of a Jeep and driving it.
Yeah.
At one point, it had literally like donuts on it.
Oh yeah. The
rubber dummies.
spare tires,
Yeah.
tire donuts. Yeah, and right now I'm stripping weight out of it as much as humanly possible, and anything else that just doesn't belong in there. So seats, seat brackets, seat belt at the lower portion. I'm gonna take out the side seat belts. I'm done with it all. And my son and I were leaving. We were playing baseball late one night, and he goes, "Why do we have a windshield on this still?" And I was like, "That is a great question."
That's hilarious that Leo brought it
I
up.
am ready to just straight bugs in the teeth, air in my face Jeep. I'm here for it.
So in the comments here,
Lots of comments.
Tony is saying my superpower is saving something for years and scrapping it 3 weeks prior to needing it.
100%.
That's-
Just so if you can't see, Jeffrey is literally
Absolutely pointing at Neil.
me.
Absolutely.
save it for decades and then finally get tired of it. and then-
Or I go and throw it away, and then 2 weeks later he's like, "What happened to this part? I know I had this part,"
So-
and then he's in the dumpster scrapping for it.
So the peculiarity of me, just to take it one step further, is I will remember exactly where things are, even if they are in the most chaotic or disorganized nature, like that Kentrol kit that I left out front.
That was stupid.
I literally
That was
sat
stupid.
out.
Behind something in the dirt for 3 years.
That's how Scott and I bonded over this years ago,
Yeah.
because I was able to sell him some bolts when we were younger.
He's like, "Oh, I remember setting this out here the one day, like 3 years ago. Let me go see if it's out there." I'm like, "It's not going to be out there." He comes walking back in with this package covered in dirt.
I think that's why
Did you just unbury that?
I think
Was
that's
it
what-
treasure?
makes me a little more successful, because like for me, time is relative. Like I don't care if it happened 3 years ago. It in my brain it feels like it was just yesterday, and I can kind of expand upon it. Ridiculous.
Daddy Jeep saying no time for spring cleaning until after Bantam Jeep Heritage Festival.
And
That
we
is
thank
coming
all
up.
of you volunteers for ensuring that event goes off without a hitch.
Not only is that coming up, but Memorial Day is also coming up, so that will be a week without a podcast.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
Joe O'Brien says, "Stop by and help me, Neil Simpson." No, clean your garage, man. I'm just gonna be like, "Oh, we need to keep it all," and I'm just gonna like restack it. Scott and I grew up in hoarder households, and kind of a Depression era trickle down thing that many households experienced. And Scott and I are really good at just dealing with stacks and piles and stuff.
Mhm.
So, Joe, you're not getting rid of anything. We're just going to restack it.
Listen, we have this drop-down unit on the property for temporary storage, as you like to call it. We all know it's permanent.
Totally step.
But
So-
Scott and I went out there to organize a little bit, and then Scott has everything piled up in this one corner, and he's like, "You're not a hoarder," and it shows. I'm like, yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Scott said that about you.
Yeah, the trailer was like full. I'm like, no,
I-
we can condense this.
we were
into a
starting to
quarter.
condense it a little bit. He fit it all into one little corner.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It was ridiculous.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So Tony's in the comments.
Ridiculously awesome.
It,
Yes.
it was, but Tony's in here saying Daddy Jeep and his truck made expensive driveline noises this weekend, so they both have some work to do before Bantam, apparently.
Mm.
And then Rob's also saying Neil's like a squirrel, burying parts. Yes, 100.
Perfectly.
I mean, that's how the
perfectly
business started,
reasonable.
where you knew where the bolts were in the dirt. You've told that story.
That's what I just said. We just shared that
Yeah.
one.
I know, but I mean,
Yeah,
you've told that story in the past, even.
Yeah, I could tell you. I mean, it's part of you were talking about the gear sets this morning, like moving them. I'm like, it doesn't matter where we move them, because within reason, I'm going to know exactly where they're at, and it's going to like haunt me regardless.
Good.
Listen to you. All right, we should do some Q&A stuff.
yeah, we
what do
should.
we think?
So, I think as far as Q&A goes, I'm going to start off with one that got emailed in right after we announced doing the Q&A, and I felt bad that we didn't get to it last week because of things happening. We didn't do the episode last week. But here is this person says, "Hey gents, attached is my Gladiator nicknamed for now Sarge. I'm looking at lifts for it. Pretty much trying to decide if I should go with a 2.5 or 3.5 inch. On the JK, you needed to change the drive shaft over 2.5 inches. Is that the same concept for the JLJT? Appreciate the podcast and the help."
Well, first of all, we appreciate the message into us.
Mm-hmm.
So as a condensing, we're talking about doing a lift, and do we need a drive shaft with the JLJT series?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want, and realistically at the 2-inch conversation Is
Over the 2.5 inch is what he's
that
asking.
over 2.5 inches,
Which over 2.5 on the JK, you were doing a drive shaft.
So I'm gonna answer it in two parts, because I'm gonna say one way and then I'm gonna say another way.
Oh.
So it'll be
That's
super
probably
confusing.
what my email back to him was, because I did answer it and tell him that we'd go more in depth on the episode.
So first, I'm gonna say the fact that the JLJT front drive shaft doesn't spin, thanks to our FAD,
yes,
it's less critical than it was with the JK, but it's still our represent bad U joint.
the word we were looking for, audience, was Rezepa.
That word. Anyway, it's still a weak point. So of course you should and will upgrade eventually if you keep doing Jeff things.
That is true.
If you're Scott and you just completely drive it stock with the hardtop on all the time, then you're fine.
So true.
It's so true.
Oh,
So the
which part of my drive shaft is going to go bad, Scott?
So here's your challenges. So the design for the front drive shaft on coming out in 2007 was what they called a high speed CV head, which the actual style of energy transfer is through a Resepa joint. Right now, you've heard some terms. Possibly, if you jump on the social pages, you'll hear the term cardan. Cardan is typically referred to as a U joint, right? So a U joint is short for universal joint. So when you hear the word universal joint, U joint, or cardan, those are all going to be that semi-traditional U joint that the industry has used predominantly for the last 60 years-ish.
And real quick, why those are less likely to be in new vehicles is because they have inherent speed up and slow down as they rotate, which makes a vibration, but they cancel each other out normally in a perfect world. That's why our older vehicles, you don't necessarily feel it, but it's not quite as smooth as the newer style joint.
As
That
the
is why they
high-speed CV
changed
heads.
it.
So CV stands for constant velocity. And ultimately, you can have a CV joint in an axle shaft. You have a CV joint in, obviously, a drive shaft. You can have a CV as part of, technically, as part of a cardan. Constant velocity is just simply the terminology used to say the energy transfer from one unit to another. So the high speed gained through the Resepa is all about smooth energy transfer. So not having a harmonic oscillation at speed. Now, you hit the nail on the head when you said, hey, the JLJTs have a FAD, which is short for front axle disconnect, which was a terrible technology that we tried in the 80s. Mothership and other people who champion the FADs, you're wrong. That's just it, right? So there you go. So terrible technology. We already tried this 30 years ago, whatever. So the only proficient gain we get out of it is the fact that drive shaft lasts a little longer.
Yep.
Because it's not actually spinning while we're using
and I'm
it.
probably getting 0.4 miles to the gallon better.
You probably are 0.4. Woo! Yay. So
And when you cow up your front drive shaft like Jeff likes to do, it doesn't spin on the way home from the trailhead, so you're fine.
So here's the other downside to the style drive shaft that appeared under the JKs for the front and rear, arguably. Two things. One is the high-speed CV head, or that Resepa, doesn't love steep angles. Anglage. Right? It doesn't love steep angles. The other, or probably, in my opinion, the biggest issue that you have is the body size.
Yes.
They actually gain strength through the overall diameter of the drive shaft, despite the fact they're using a thinner wall of construction. But basically, it's stamped steel that's rolled and then spun for speed and strength.
Yep.
And the overall design is not all that special as far as an internal slip with U-joints or CV joints on either end. That kind of design we've used for decades. Here's the thing. When you go with that bigger lift, what is factually happening is that bigger body is now at a more likely to catch on off-road obstacles and or parts that are hanging down on your Jeep or up or wherever. And then two, the anglage of the CV head. I think at the end of the day, what we often tell people is you don't have to upgrade right away.
It's the go-to thing that when I'm quoting lift kits is, no, you don't have to do this right now. Eventually you will, and we recommend doing it, but you don't have to do it right this second.
Eventually we will encourage you to go to a traditional double cardan CV style drive shaft. And all that means is it's the style drive shaft that we had through the front of the TJ Wranglers, their whole existence, the front of the Cherokees, their whole existence, the XJ Cherokees. And arguably that just gives you the appropriate angleage that allows the function of the transfer case output to the input of the pinion of your axles to flow.
And as always, it depends on what your intent to use the vehicle is. If you're doing a 4-inch lift, making it a rock buggy, you're doing a drive shaft.
Yes.
Right away.
Okay. So, next question. I'm actually going to, since that was the first question that got emailed in, I'm going to skip to the last question that got emailed in.
You're not first, you're last.
It literally just came in over the weekend. I got it this morning. It says, is the Pentastar 3.2 liter and 3.6 liter 2014 to present MS 201 BK cartridge to spin-on adapter a worthwhile investment? And that is the Baxter spin-on adapter for the oil.
I'm mixed.
Depends on what's important to you. If plastic makes you angry, I guess I could see it. Personally, myself, I don't see the value in it, but that's just my own personal opinion on my own personal Jeep. If you feel compelled to do it, then I don't see any harm in it.
Where I try to look at the both sides of the coin is that you and I specifically, as we've helped formulate opinions over the years, one of the things that we just accept to be true is a level of blow by and a level of oil consumption by engines in general.
That's because we owned junk 4 liters at our first and tenure, and you just kept putting oil in them, and it was just part of life.
It was just part of the process.
And compared to now, this is great.
And that's the thing, is that based on our perspective of many years, within the automotive community, this idea that hey, what is happening within your engine right now is light years ahead of what we were dealing with on our best days 20 years ago.
100%.
So the question is, though, is that perspective on a professional level correct? Right. And so that's one thing that I'm just kind of vulnerably unpacking for our listening audience to say, is that to go, hey, this is not something you should be worrying about because, quite frankly, it does not have a bearing on your engine's longevity or desirability or performance. And it just seems to be another mousetrap. Right. And so that's the thing I always have to I feel like I'm the weights and measures to be is this a mousetrap or, because, hey, these engines have been doing this for decades and decades, and these are actually the best we've ever had, so therefore this is a mousetrap? Or should we be, air quotes, demanding better and utilizing oil catch cans and the spin-on filters that limit bleed down time? Because ultimately the spin-on filter, two things. One, it should help the system maintain oil pressure to alleviate dry starts.
If you use the right filter.
And it will allow you to use a spin-on filter, non-cartridge style.
Yeah.
Right now, most, if not all, arguably all, 3.236s, as Jeffrey had read, since their inception in 12 and then again in 14, use a cartridge-style filter. And we have arguably been using cartridges for decades. Chrysler just jumped up on it recently, within the last decade and a half.
And especially foreign manufacturers have used cartridge for a long, long time. There's lots of advantages to it and disadvantages. And maybe that's what we need to do is just say, why would you want to do this? Well, if you use the right non-cartridge filter with appropriate drain back valve, the oil should stay in the filter and you won't have a couple second dry start for it to fill the filter. They do have things in place on the factory setup to try to limit that as well, but I also know from experience of being around cars a long time, not all metal case filters hold the oil either.
Sure.
And they can also drain down. That used to be Napa would tell you this one was a better drain back preventer and this one wasn't. But there's literally metal filters out there that don't have them. So you literally have to be careful what you put on there if that's important to you. because you can literally put this unit on, then use the wrong filter and still have the same
You're
problem.
not really any further ahead.
Correct.
And I think that that's really the challenge with the oil catch cans, with the spin-on adapter filters. I'm not going to get out there and be like, this is a ridiculous use of your funds. My thing is, I suppose, and it kind of goes to the drive shaft a little bit when we do a lift kit. And this is obviously a conversation that Jeffrey or I will have, or you'll hear across the front counter when we're consulting with somebody. I kind of want you to spend your money elsewhere. Like if you're going to do all these things, then let me help you invest wisely that will gain you some performance or some comfort or something that's a better utilization to you, versus I'm going to appropriate my funds at this time to get this drive shaft because I think I have to have it, or this oil catch cam because I think I have to have it. Arguably, have any engines' lifespans been inherently extended because of oil catch cans or because of drain back adapters?
I think I can answer that is back 20 years ago. If you had 100,000 miles on your 350 Chevy, you were pretty darn jazzed up. You were pretty happy. It was kind of tired. Now I regularly see 3.6s with $150, $180, and those people are getting in those Jeeps and driving them cross country.
Yep.
So that right there to me kind of answers that question, because back in the day, where did you put your filter? It was a metal spin on that went on the block. Oil literally couldn't fall out of it.
Yes.
Yep. And those motors had a lifespan that was so long. We're arguably double that or triple that. And like Toyotas I've seen 400,000 mile Toyotas with cartridge filters, and who's not worried about that filter, that person in that Camry.
Yep.
They don't even know where the motor is, let alone the fact that what's this for Greg?
He felt some type of way about them Camry folks. I'm calling out Ford. I'm calling out Ford people, and he's calling out Camry. We're just here to if you don't drive a Jeep, you're wrong. That's we're just gonna rename the podcast. So I think at the end of the day, if your priority set and you've convinced yourself that the spin-on filter is the next correct modification for you, I do support you. I'm going to do air quotes. I was there when Baxter released this product, and I couldn't help but noodle on it at the show and have it in my hands. And he was still prototyping it. The gentleman who actually created it, we had a nice, we exchanged, cards and commentary. And I wish them the best in their process. Do I think it's super high on my priority list? I do not. There's other things that I think need to be addressed vehicularly prior to that.
Tony's in the comments saying 100K isn't the death sentence that it used to be for sure. Keep up on the preventative maintenance and drive it.
And that's kind of exactly how I feel, honestly. Being active with these vehicles, driving them, and consistent maintenance, unlike Scott's approach to his tractor, is the key to success in this situation.
So next question. I lifted my Jeep and put bigger tires on. The jack that came with the Jeep no longer reaches. If I blow a tire on a trail, how am I supposed to change my tire now?
Well, again,
airbags.
You can do two different things.
Airbags.
You do what Neil and Scott do, and you get like a chunk of wood or inanimate object, and you put the jack on top of that. But you shouldn't do that.
Why do people listen to us?
And then
I don't know. That's a really good question.
You should call us, and we can get you a foot riser that's literally made for it. And if you have a JK, if I remember right, it even nestles in like all-purposeful and nicely.
I like high lift jacks for these purposes.
I knew you would bring up high lift jack, and I feel like Scott is anti high lift jack for some reason.
Well, because you couldn't put it on the front of Jeffrey's JT because he has a plastic front bumper.
So, and this is and Scott's right.
Exactly.
Scott's right. So, and this is a great conversation. We could probably have an entire podcast dedicated to this question, honestly. because the off-road community as a whole globally has been attempting to answer this specific question for eons at this point. Because at this point in time, we have the traditional farm jack, right? So we just call that a farm jack
Yep.
style, which is the most reputable name brand is High Lift, which we saw the cutest one at the show.
It was just a little guy.
It was just a little guy. You can't buy that anymore. It was
Like a 2-footer.
it was literally
Yeah,
like a 2-footer. It was
was-
so cool.
It was only for a stock Willys that you only had to get the tire like barely off the ground.
Yeah.
When I was in the fire department, we had like 3 or 4 sizes on the truck, just because there's different applications.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And High Lift, as a manufacturer, does even sell a first responders jack that is specifically meant for, for volunteer fire department or fire department
Yeah, yeah.
consumption. So we have the farm jack, right, which stows nicely and it looks all tactical. Those of us who like that look, and you can hang it on racks and off bumpers and so on and so forth.
Gets you called when they think it's a weapon.
When
on
they think
your
it's
hood.
Yeah.
a weapon strapped to your vehicle in some manner. You have your scissor jack, and if you were to have an appropriate lift point or base, you could potentially use that. I saw somebody jump in real quick and say a bottle jack works. Absolutely, a bottle jack does work. The challenge with bottle jacks for the off-road community is the small pad for the position, the lift plate. So if you are in an off-camber situation and the bottle jack starts to list, it's very hard to correct the bottle jack because the lift plate pad is so small itself. So then you're into adapters. Understand that the High Lift itself, if you do have a metal bumper or it's in an appropriate lift point, can also get loosey-goosey at the
Oh, yeah.
top.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
When I was in emergency training, we would use the high lift jack to get the vehicle up, but we were cribbing it to make sure that it
In the
didn't drop back
process.
down.
Which is smart.
Every
Which is
time you got enough to put a block in, you put another block stack in, so that
which
if
is
the vehicle did come down, because that lift is not the most secure lift.
right. It's performing the mechanical function of raising the vehicle.
Yeah.
But it is not stabilizing the vehicle. And you have to know that if you're using the High Lift, there's no safety precaution. This is a use at your own risk situation, right? All right, so then the other piece is the ARB has 2 options because, again, we've been trying to solve this as an industry for eons. ARB has looks like a farm jack, but it's like a farm jack and a bottle jack got together and had a baby. And so they have a specific lift unit, which I've only seen like literally on expedition vehicles, like your Land Rover-esque Discoveries that have, whatever, too much money, and now you have this super clean hydraulic lift unit. Okay, so that's good, but really not practical in our industry. And then the other one, which has been tried multiple times from a number of different manufacturers, is literally airbags.
Yeah.
And so whether it be an onboard air system or, again, I feel like, and I don't want to talk bad on the Baxter guys because I would love for them to come on and explain their product sometime in the future. So, but it feels like a similar product that's regurgitated every so many years. But basically, it's a bag that goes up to your exhaust. It hooks on, it cinches onto your exhaust, and your exhaust fills this bag and it lifts underneath your vehicle, which is.
I wonder how many people get burnt using that.
And I've never seen it in real life, but I have over my years of enthusiasm through different rags, different YouTube video, all these different things. I have seen this lift bag
It's
in
always
concept.
the vehicle stuck in a sandbar.
It is always in sand.
Yes.
And the biggest thing when you talk about the airbags that it's important to note too is the airbag itself is not going to do the job. You need the pads for that as well to protect the airbags.
Yes. No,
So-
they're specifically made bags for lifting. You know?
Correct, but there's still, you want to put a flat block of wood or plywood underneath of it and one above it to technically keep it safe so the bag doesn't rupture while you're using it.
Well, I think the ones that I've certainly seen have almost like lift pads or lift points built
Yeah.
into them.
And they have like this whole cover sheath thing to protect, but you can't
Right.
see the bag. It's literally in this little protective cocoon.
So I mean, you can.
Yeah.
the thing is, like, arguably, almost nobody is actually going to have these in real life.
No.
Yeah.
Right? To answer the question that was specifically asked here,
I'm
is-
going to give the easiest answer. Go with a group.
Well,
Enough
Yes.
guys, and it'll just be done. You won't even know what happened.
that's also happened to Jeff.
I want snatch blocks and winch. We didn't bring that up. I want
absolutely.
snatch blocks, and I just want to
Well-
winch it up.
Daddy Jeep's saying, I have too much suspension travel. With a high lift, I have to ratchet strap my axle to the frame.
But that's exactly what you do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm glad he brings that up for our listeners at home, that that in theory, that is what you would have to do. If you have too much travel out of your suspension, you then have to turn and ensure that you have a sufficient ratchet strap. Please don't use the Harbor Freight 400-pound ones. I use and abuse the snot out of those. But what I do for myself and what you should do for yourself are two entirely different things. Please use a good quality, at least a 1,200-pound or more strap, webbing, and hook configuration to hold up your suspension, and then you use your high lift from there.
The real answer is this is depends on the Jeep and the situation that you're trying to solve,
And the person operating
and the person
Yeah.
doing it.
mechanism.
Level of confidence and experience with that.
So like normal with stuff that we deal with, there is not a one answer fits all scenario, which is why we get called and asked.
Well, and I was going to say, the beauty is, and this is why I was, kind of briefly mentioning the Baxter guys, we don't have, as an independent, we don't have any say in who and how we sell things. So we can sell you, if you want to buy one of these expensive A or B jacks, I'd love to sell it to you, and you can experiment with it. Likewise, the airbag or the high lift, what we do for ourselves is one thing, but what you want to purchase or share with us, that's, the gloves are off. So we can do whatever, There's pros and cons to all of it.
So the next question, let's see the comment. As with most things, when it comes to load securement, nothing succeeds like, and then it cuts off. Hang on.
Yeah, I was going to say
Like excess.
Mm.
Nothing
Like the
succeeds like excess. Having more than enough protection.
Sure.
Yep.
And the cribbing. I like that you
The cribbing.
bring up the cribbing. Find a log, find a concrete block, take your spare tire off, throw the spare tire and wheel under there
It's
as
a great
needed.
option, yeah. Except for
there's-
you should be using the spare tire to put on if you're blowing a tire.
Well, that's if we blew a tire. I didn't know what was wrong with the
Yeah,
vehicle.
well,
Maybe
trail
the
fixes, you never know.
trail fix. right.
So the next question. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I just got my Jeep aligned, and the shop didn't provide me with any kind of alignment sheet. Is that normal, or should I go back and demand the printout from the shop?
Well, it depends on how angry you are at that
I'm
day.
angry.
You're angry. I saw
I'm
fire
angry.
in your eyes when I
angry.
read that.
I'm angry.
Neil's going in yelling. I would go in politely and ask for it, and then when they told me that they don't have a printer for it or something, then I would get angry,
So
which
we
has all
have,
happened.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've personally dealt with, we have personally dealt with shops that I believe are reputable with good quality technicians working at them, and legitimately their printer or their interface to their alignment machine
Mm-hmm.
are not working. It's 2024, and technology is oftentimes changing, and I recognize the legitimacy of that statement that the alignment machine is not communicating appropriately with the printer. Those things do happen, so I get it. But then their responsibility, once you've called that to light and said, I would like a printout, their responsibility is to then adapt and overcome and
Mhm.
figure out how to get you that printout that you desire.
Some level of documentation.
Some level of documentation, something to prove or to share with you as the consumer, to give you the value for that alignment that you received. You might not exactly know how to read that alignment sheet, but when the opportunity presents itself, that documentation should follow the vehicle, and or if it goes somewhere else and they're trying to diagnose X, Y, and Z that's going on with your vehicle, that level of measurement and documentation will benefit the next person.
I mean, arguably, that's a situation where a piece of paper could save you over $100, because if we don't have that paper and we're now trying to diagnose your Jeep why it's pulling or acting a mess,
Well, there's
we-
$100 in alignment right there.
we now have to send it out to alignment to get those numbers so that we now know what to adjust.
100%. And you've already paid for that, right?
Right.
So in our situation, and what I encourage our family of enthusiasts here at home listening to us is, if you are going somewhere else other than us, ask that you receive the alignment. So
Yes.
front load the conversation, front load your expectation that you would like, when you pick up your vehicle, that the alignment form will be there. And you can just say something like, well, I have the alignment specifications for me to see and to take with the Jeep when this service is complete.
Yep.
That sets the shop that you're going to up for success because, again, in our situation where the printer wasn't interfacing well with the machine, they've then taken a USB drive, plugged it in, saved the file to our USB, and returned it to us to print at a later date.
Mm.
That's perfectly acceptable in my mind, you know? But unless we front-loaded that conversation, that technician probably isn't going to do that for you. They're just going to go, oh, well, our printer's broken, and the majority of vehicle owners don't care about their alignment, so why should you?
Right.
Well, Jeep owners we're just a little bit different, and I would argue that a lot of Jeep owners do care, and if you don't, you're going to talk to a buddy a week or two later. You're going to take it to a pro shop, a month or two later, and they're going to care. So get that documentation. It's valuable to you and to your bank account, as you were saying, and then for the professionalism of the service as well.
Now, we actually have another alignment question, and it actually ties well with what Nathan just wrote in. Nathan's comment says, what's an alignment? I installed my lift 2 years ago in my driveway. No issues yet. The question that was wrote in was, my stock Jeep is pulling to the left. Do I just need to get an alignment? So I think this is a good opportunity to explain what you're actually getting in an alignment.
Well, and I'm going to have a qualifier. My wife's CJ7 with leaf springs and the straight axle, it's pretty much there's nothing to change. You're going to set your toe and your steer head, and you're kind of done. So you can do that if you're competent enough with a tape measure and know what you're doing, and kind of not go to a full-fledged alignment. But things with track bars, coil springs, adjustable control arms, that kind of stuff, now we're a little bit different.
I'm going to take it a little bit of a step further and say crossover steering, which your CJ7 has crossover.
Yep.
And JKs since 07, and then obviously JLs and JTs all have crossover steering. And arguably, when an alignment or when a lift is performed, your toe is relatively unchanged. The only thing that is specifically changed is steer ahead, because as you get vertical rise from the drag link to tie rod orientation, the steering wheel goes off to the side a little bit.
Because it's still locked at that, and it needs to be longer at this
It
point.
needs to be longer, and your steer head needs to be set. Now, where you used to lift a Jeep and you absolutely had to get an alignment was going to be your inverted Y steering, which was common, or your Centerlink steering, which is going to be your YJs, your XJs, your TJs, so on and so forth.
Yep.
Because as that steering was constructed, you would actually, as you lifted the vehicle, it would toe in the tires to the point where you would destroy tires within a first couple few drives. If the vehicle would even track down the road for you, it would almost immediately death wobble post lifting.
Yep.
So the issue with alignments is that it is very specific to the vehicle. The alignment as an umbrella term in general is actually very rudimentary in Jeeps. For the most part, it is toe and steer ahead. There's really no magic when it comes to alignments. And so to address the question specifically, as my stock Jeep is pulling, there's really nothing to a change with an alignment. With that said, professionally, we use alignments to measure with basically lasers the trueness of the Jeep as it is.
Yep.
We'll be able to see camber, caster, thrust, a number of measurements that help us understand what is going on with the vehicle. But if
Right.
your stock Jeep is pulling, there's very little that's adjustable there.
Right.
And so therefore, an alignment is not going to solve any issues.
But it does give us a baseline for diagnostics to see where we can make changes to make that
Well,
better.
and
Agreed.
and alignment doesn't necessarily mean that's what's causing the pull. It could be a brake, it could be a tire, it could be a bunch of different things.
Absolutely.
You can't immediately know just off of that.
And I think it's interesting to kind of just further expand on that is how many times people call in and be like, well, I just need an alignment. And I'm like, but you don't. Like, that's a waste of your money. And there are plenty of shops out there, and that's one of the things that we just do a little bit differently, where the shop, and I think I was thinking about it this weekend myself, people and their approach with us, oftentimes we want to get to the root cause, right? I'm not really good at, hey, I call up, I just want you to perform this service for me. And I'm just like, well, I don't want to just perform that service for you because I feel like it's a waste of your money.
Right.
But I think that there is a number of consumers out there who go, I already know what I want to be done, and I just want you to do that.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really tough as a professional to be like, I don't want to give you an alignment because it's not going to fix anything. I know that
Well,
your
especially
issue is not going to
My
fix it.
first question when somebody calls in and says, I just need to get it on the schedule for alignment. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you need an alignment? And usually it's because they feel a shake or they feel something off. And 99% of the time, it's because there's bad components underneath the vehicle that need to be addressed, not because it needs an alignment.
Or the other problem is now, you were perfectly happy with the tire starting to chop or starting to wear funny before, but now you've taken it to a professional shop and now suddenly you notice that. And now it's like, oh, well, why is it doing that? I brought it to you. Well, it's because we only did what you asked us to do. Now that's another problem. It's an underlying cause. So now we have to go in and really, if you want your tires to last as long as they can, you need your alignment right, you need your suspension square, you need your tire pressure correct, you need your proper shocks, that kind of stuff. It's not just one little part of the vehicle. You got to look at the whole picture of it.
100%. The last thing I do want to just address, Nathan, here is that I think that a lot of people have been very successful, especially from the JK up model of just doing a lift. And whether you set the toe or the steer at that time, I mean, almost always you just set steer. A number of DIYers that I'm acquainted with. Again, you follow me online, I'm going to follow you. The DIYers who do their own work, they at least change their steering wheel and then they go on with life. The piece that we do it specifically for us as professionals, especially in those newer models, why we do it is twofold. One, it's a good checks and balances, right? We've touched the vehicle. We've done a bunch of stuff. We actually ship it off to a shop that we have a ton of respect for and appreciate what they bring to the table. So it's a redundancy piece to say, hey, we have a fresh set of eyes who are not invested in us per se. They're invested in you as the consumer. Their job is to perform this alignment, qualifying all the things that Scott just said are good to the vehicle. So fresh set of eyes. The other piece is it's just a nice baseline to say, hey, this work was performed. We have this documentation and
Here's what the alignment says it was at when you did the work.
correct. And
Yep.
it's just all the documentation lines up. We've got your mileage, we've got the work, the performed, so on and so forth. And now, you're off to a fresh start. It's a good checkpoint in your ownership of the vehicle.
Yep.
All right.
So this one says, help, I have a cylinder 5 misfire and already changed a bunch of parts. How do I make this go away?
You're getting a new engine.
That was easy.
You know what? We're an hour into this podcast, and if you're still with us, I thank you so much for that. Things were just, they're just getting good and heating up. So there's, Jeffrey and I talked about this question. It's one that I've actually seen on a couple different talking points recently within social groups and forums and whatnot. Also, we have a couple of Jeeps on property that this has been shared. This is a shared symptom. What I think is happening What I think is happening is all vehicles kind of ebb and flow as far as how we experience them. As certain vehicles, we've talked about this before with tires, we've talked about it with transmissions. There are certain things that when we look at the utilization, the age, the mileage, so on and so forth of the vehicle, there are certain things that are all going to age out in a similar capacity.
Yep.
Just a few years ago, there was a rash of oil coolers all leaking and blowing apart. The seals all went bad. Sensors went bad. There was a thing that we just understood as an industry. We were going to be doing oil coolers. I would argue 3 to 5 years prior to that, we were doing TIPMs, right? 2 to 3 years prior to that, we were doing 4 to 8/8 in TJs because Dana 35s were blowing apart C-clips and falling apart, and customers were building axles, right?
At this point, we haven't seen that in years.
Years, because those Jeeps that it was going to go bad, it did go bad, right? And will somebody blow apart a Dana 35 tonight wheeling or this week or weekend? Yep, somewhere in the country, a Dana 35 will die. But it's not in mass like it once was. So the demand and the knowledge of it starts to slowly erode away. And what I think is what makes us unique as a business, and people always like, you just work on Jeeps? Yes, we only work on Jeeps. So if you bring me a problem from 15 years ago, the likelihood is we've seen it. We've worked on it. We've addressed it. We were there when it broke the first time. I'm here now to address it for you in the best way possible versus you're going to your mechanic who's like, I don't know, George. So here's the problem with the cylinder 5 misfire.
Go ahead.
We don't know what's going on.
There it is.
We don't know. I'm looking at you right now, JK owners. Something quirky is happening. And I can just tell you that the wave, I can see the wave off the coastline. I can't understand it.
It's coming in like a tsunami.
It is, but I can't understand it. Because what's happening is, it appears, and I would love an engineer, I would love the mothership, if somebody's listening and they have some insight on this, I would love to know. But it appears that the cylinder 5, I believe, is like the first red flag you see in a failing combustion electric system, right? So when I say electric, I don't know if it's harness and computer. I don't know if it's pre-detonation, if it's a timing issue of the VVT system, the variable valve train for those listening at home.
So real quick on that, since you mentioned the timing system, your first answer was replace the engine. Why are we replacing the engine and not redoing the timing set?
Because everything is, and we're seeing this on Jeeps with again, 150, 180, 200,000 miles on them. Everything is worn and equally. And that is a problem, is like there's not just a smoking gun, there's 80 smoking guns.
Yep.
And everything is very involved and very hard to replace and very time consuming to replace and very costly. So sadly, there is, yes, is the motor still running? Yep. Is it blown apart? No. But you have two choices. I can spend a ton of money and time and effort trying to replace one worn component at a time on the engine, which is still otherwise worn, or I can just put a whole new motor in it and be done with it. That's just for when it's electrical problem.
Cost-benefit analysis shows that the new engine is very little more than just doing the timing set itself.
Timing set's very involved.
Very involved. So at that point, you're only spending a little bit extra, and you're getting a whole new engine, and it's getting that refresh.
And it usually has a warranty.
It usually comes with a warranty.
So
especially if you go through us, where we use Jasper.
So and there's an interesting follow-up question to this that just came through, and I want to address that, but I want to finish my point in this conversation real quick, and correlating it to today's issues versus what I'll call yesterday's issues, in the sense that back in the day, timing on a vehicle was pretty rudimentary, right? Cylinder 1, top dead center. You had a chain. You had your crank sprocket basically,
Yep.
and you had a cam sprocket. You had a chain that ran them, maybe a guide or a tensioner at minimum, right? That's
Yeah.
pretty well basic. Is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
a fair assumption? And
And it was a
with
short chain.
it's a short chain, maybe a 12-inch diameter overall. It's shaped a little bit like an egg because the lower sprocket's bigger than the top sprocket. Just kind of give you
Other
a
way
kind of
around. That's fine.
yeah, just give you a kind of a way to conceptualize it in your head. Okay. What ends up happening is you set timing back in the day. As long as your distributor was dropped in, into the right position, your timing was set on a timing light. There was a little bit of advance and retard, and things reasonably worked. As the whole engine wore out, you could adjust that timing to take up a little bit of that slack. But it was all fairly kind of rudimentary, and the engine would just kind of keep working. It would get a little noisier, it'd get a little claddier. Things would, detonation would happen a little pre or post what they should. But, arguably the Jeep would kind of lumber along, or the engine would just kind of lumber along. Okay. Today's technology, the timing set for a 3236, for example, but 2.4s, 2.0s, the whole shooting match, anything that's going to be overhead cam and some type of variable valve timing, has how many chains would you say a 3.6 has?
Goodness gracious. 1, 2, 4? I think
No.
you're 4 or 5.
So,
off the top of my head.
I think it's 5.
So on a 4.0, we had Uno chain, right? Uno chain on a
Which
4.0.
was a lot bigger of a link.
Correct. It was a lot bigger a link. There was actually kind of wide tolerances in the grand scheme of how automotive technology works. In our newer engines, they work beautifully, and when they do work. But to achieve that output, we have a lot more complex moving parts. And so arguably, there are 4 or 5 timing chains that perform the function of that one rudimentary chain that the 4.0 and the 2.5 had previously. And now we have hydraulic oil-filled tensioners,
Yep.
which may or may not be why we're seeing timing issues arise post-oil changes. Just a theory that I'm throwing out there.
Yep.
You have hydraulic tensioners. You have guides that literally allow the chain to, they're plastic, and the chain is metal, and it sweeps across it over its lifespan, so that plastic guide can wear out. So there's all these things that are operating within the timing set of the newer engine. So if you're just off a little bit, the tolerances are so much tighter that and the electronics are so much more advanced on the 326. I might argue that the same level of wear and tear existed on the 4.0. The engine and the computer just cared less
100%.
to achieve the same level of function.
I would agree.
And I think that's why we're seeing the cylinder 5 misfire, is that it's just starting.
Now,
It's just starting to wear out.
with that being said, if we're going to do a timing set, the part is not really that expensive. So why is it so expensive to do the timing set? What parts of the engine do you have to take off, Scott?
It is very invasive.
Well, real quick, and I'm sorry, I'm jumping in on this. I'm taking this. We had a timing cover on the 4.0s and 2.5s.
Correct.
That
That's
was it.
why I'm
There was a
bringing it
cover.
up.
Whoop, cover, pulled off. I don't know, 12 bolts. It's
Yep.
off, right? All right. Scott, do your
Okay.
thing.
So you got to take the intake manifold upper off. You have to take both valve covers off. You have to take all the accessories off. You have to take the whole front plate off there, which involves water pump, all that stuff, hoses. So now we've now discovered that your water pump, while it wasn't leaking or making any noise, is now halfway to failure. So now that justifies that. Oh, we touched your hoses. Okay, now those all look, again, they weren't failing or leaking.
But they're swollen.
But
and
they're swelling and they're tired, so now we need to do that. We have gaskets for all that. In order to do all the chains, the upper and lower oil pan have to come off. So now we're doing an oil change on top of it.
You're basically down to a
Almost a long block.
almost a
bare.
long block. You're almost down
Yeah.
to a bare block. It's the most fascinating situation there. So, so I'm going to go to John Graber's question here, right? And he says, John says, couldn't you say that about the whole Jeep, Scott? And I think when that came through, it was in regards to the wear that is present within that 150,000 mile.
It was
engine.
the 80 smoking guns comment that Scott said. There's 80 smoking guns instead of just one.
I mean, in the whole scheme of the world, yes, the whole vehicle has that mileage on it, and the whole vehicle is worn. But again, we're looking at a cost-benefit analysis. There's certain things on the Jeep that cost more to repair than others, and it justifies, instead of getting that far down the rabbit hole into the engine and not having any warranty on it, and having a very multitude of still worn components, to just change the motor. Yes, the transmission still has that mileage. Yes, the axles still do. But what shapes the Jeep in? Is the body okay? Is the frame rusted out? You're going to repair it in the future. You're going to put a transmission in it. You're going to put axles in it. So at that point, there's a person that's going to trade it off, and they're going to go buy a new Jeep, and everything's hit the reset button. You don't have to, though.
Yeah, and I've been noodling on this a lot myself recently, especially driving this this beater TJ has been both refreshing but also frustrating because it.
I just read John's follow-up comment. He was talking about you because you're kind of worn out.
Oh dear.
Oh, that's
I
good.
love it.
Oh.
I love it. So I was expanding upon the cheap Jeep, right? And I'm driving it thinking to myself, okay, if I had nothing else, if I had no other projects in my life, and this was the one Jeep I had, I could see myself pulling this in and tackling uno aspect of it. One little project, one little corner. I could cut out X, Y, and Z part. I could replace blah part as long as I maintain the frame, as long as I got the schmutz out of there. Okay, I could put new control arms under it, and I would see a little bit of a reset of the control arms. Oh, hey, I could do just this little piece. And piece by piece, I could rebuild this worn-out parts Jeep.
And that's why I think you see people that are on the opposite end of the spectrum. They've now bought that vintage vehicle that's worn out because it's, quaint.
Sure.
And now they're going to slowly drive it while they fix it up. And each time they make something new, they feel that immediate impact.
Yes.
And they're like, man, I could feel that suspension that was worn out. Now I changed it, and man, it rides so much better, and that kind of stuff. And you're slowly building that up. The problem is that only really makes sense if you're have to do it for your budget constraints, but you're going to pay more long term,
Right.
versus just tearing it all down and addressing it all at once and making that vehicle all rebuilt.
It's a weird thing it's almost contrary to I think our human experience, because and I've had this conversation with a number of people right now. It's literally cheaper, air quotes, to buy the property, to build a new building in a commercial area, to put in all the utilities, to do all these things. And that is why we're seeing, malls and strip malls and all these other businesses mass exodus and build little additional outlying buildings and properties. Somehow we've gotten to the point in society where it's literally easier to just completely start over or complete disassembly and then reassemble with better, more components or newer reset components. I think it's fascinating because unfortunately I agree. It's the buy once, cry once. It's the done right the first time, whatever the mentality is. But I also find myself stricken with hey, if I just redo the fenders today, then I know that those are reset. If I just redo the U-joints, so I know that those are going to, so the difference between rebuilding slowly and maintenance. And I think that that's a very fine line. With the engine specifically, are we doing maintenance or are we rebuilding?
Well,
because
and as far as rebuilding, doing the timing set, the labor, Joe Barilla says it best. Go look at the two estimates he was sent last week. Look at how much the labor hours are to do the chain versus just replacing the engine. I mean, the labor to replace an engine is significantly less than to do a timing set.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah. I think we got to wrap this up. Despite the fact we've got great interaction from folks at home, and I appreciate the comments. I think the Q&A was good, and it got people got the juices flowing. And maybe we'll have to add it in as every couple months or something we do the Q&A, and
There was some personal questions on there. I don't know if you wanted to get to those or if you want to wrap it up.
I think we got to wrap it up unless there's something something of particular interest. Or we'll have to save them for another time. We'll just feed them out onesie twosie in the future here.
Sounds good to me.
But we've got a lot to attend to ourselves. We want to keep it succinct for our listeners at home to the best of our ability, and let people finish up their fake meetings, get off their cold calls that they said they were making today.
Well, and there's one more update as far as podcasting goes. Obviously, we have our Patreon. You can email me, and I can get your stuff onto the air as well. But just recently, they added an opportunity for people to direct message us right from the podcast streaming. It's called Fan Mail. You can literally go into the description of the podcast on your favorite streaming platform, click the link, and it'll send us a direct message.
Yep. So that's something for specifically the people who are downloading and listening to the podcast, off site of the live itself.
Nathan's saying, you mean I have to go back to work?
Yeah, got to go back to work, folks. We've got a lot of shows coming up. It's a busy time of year. We saw a lot of people out there doing Go Topless Day and kind of spreading all that Jeep love throughout all of the community. So I am so just tickled to see across the many different clubs, organizations, and businesses out there supporting this amazing community that is the Jeep lifestyle.
Joe O'Brien said he's off today, so I guess that means he's got to go organize his garage.
Sounds like a game plan. Until then, Jeep on.
Keep on.
Keep on.